Welcome to the Quantum Business Book Club. We will finish this year looking at some of the Western world's favorite fantasy fiction novels, because these authors and these creators and these visionaries saw what was possible. I call it quantum business because every page I open bends time. I can sit across the table from genius like Huxley, Tolkien, and Le Guin. I can trade notes with minds who built entire realities during collapse. And now you are invited to join me. Each of these books reshaped how I lead, create, and play the long game. For me, reading isn't consumption. It's also not distraction. It helps me play the game to win. In fact, these books allow me to be the game designer. So this season is our Fantasy and Magic series, The Myth Makers of Revolution. Every time the world industrializes, someone rediscovers magic. I'm Nicole VZ, and this is your field manual for founders and CEOs, creative visionaries, artists, leaders, and those of you willing to build something amidst the destruction. This is the next age of business in the wreckage of the last. Each week, we will pull a thread from writers who faced war, tyranny, and mechanization and turned them into myth. They built the map to hope. From Soviet satire to celestial wonder, we decode the leadership patterns that kept humanity awake inside the darkness. This isn't nostalgia. This is navigation. Welcome. I never know how much to give you at the beginning of these, especially because this is a Fantasy Saves the World series. We recorded a little intro special for this particular run, and I lose a lot of you at the very beginning of these. But I do this for me, and I think it's worth mentioning. This barely made the cut, and in fact wasn't a part of this original series. You might also notice that I sound much better in this episode. I recorded using my computer mic last time around, and I had every intention of meeting the quality both you and I deserve. But life is happening full fucking throttle right now. Whenever you're listening to this, it matters not, because we be time traveling together. We be quantum business book clubbing. But it is the end of the calendar year, Gregorian calendar, and which makes it the holiday season, no matter which hemisphere you are in or what holidays you celebrate. Or if you're anything like me, you don't, but everyone else is losing their goddamn minds. So it's been crazy, meaning I didn't get to re-record last episode. And here we are. We're living. It also means I get to do this episode because I lost my Kindle, which is where I do all of my reading. And it was fucking tragic. It stopped me in my tracks when I realized what had actually happened. And due to Amazon being the egregore that it is, there was no recovery that I had the capacity to push for in that moment. There's much more to the story. At me if you want to hear it. That meant I couldn't finish the original plan because I read the books. And I sat with it for a second and I went, I wonder if there's any other novel that I have read and am familiar enough with that I can bring it to you through this portal, through this lens of creating a blueprint for success, where an author wrote to contextualize their own present day experience that is still wildly relevant and therefore inspiring for us today, hence the time travel. And immediately this book popped into my mind, not only because it was one of my childhood favorites, but I had to wonder, what was the author, Madeleine L'Engle, going through at the time? And could it possibly relate to what we are going through in our time? And the answer to that is fuck yeah, I can. So thank you for humoring me. Thank you for accepting subpar audio on the last one. It happens every now and again when I stop recording and then re-record. If I don't get all of the settings right, which happens because I get frustrated and start rushing, it will just default to both my computer camera and my computer microphone, both of which are unacceptable. And yet here we are, accepting. So before we step into the cosmos, let me start with something deeply personal. This book was my favorite childhood book, and I spent a lot of time in books. I also spent a lot of time with audiobooks. Back in the day, before I was a teenager, I would listen to books on tape to fall asleep. That resulted in me memorizing books. Like I could recite Peter Pan and Alice in Wonderland from start to finish. Cool. That skill's been really useful. But this book grabbed me because it spoke to me on a level that felt adult. And I could never not remember mitochondria or Charles Wallace. And this book left an imprint. And eventually I struggled with my own childhood illness that no one had an answer for. And I couldn't help but think how it wasn't just Meg or the aunts. Like every character in this book felt like me. I didn't have the language for it at the time, but I did recognize myself in this book long before I recognized myself anywhere else. The intensity of the protagonist, Meg, her unwillingness to be what everybody thought she should be or act the way that she was supposed to act, her inability to fit into the containers adults handed her, her father, a brilliant scientist whose work consumed him, mirrored my own experience, her brother, Charles Wallace, this uncanny child prodigy who felt like an alien, also my experience. This book wasn't a fantasy for me. It felt like an autobiography I wished I was living. I just couldn't find that tear. I didn't know it yet, but this book understood my family system long before I did. And because you and I are deep in this season of looking backward to understand what's coming next, here's the twist. Madeleine L'Engle wasn't just ahead of her time. She wrote a book that folded time. And something else I like to bring to your attention and to every creator and creative and founder and leader. You know what I'm going to say next? Trailblazer, rule breaker, believer. This book, what I like to bring to your attention or what I like to remind you is oftentimes success is predicated by multiple public failures. And Madeleine had submitted this to over 24 publishers, this book, this transcript, and got denied. Why? They said it made no sense. It didn't fit. This was an adult book written for children audiences. It was a genre-bending science, myth, quantum family drama with a girl as the hero, a telepathic brother, a tesseract as the plot device, and a cosmic evil named It, written in 1960. I think she started it in 1959. Absolutely not, they told her over and over again. They said children would never understand it. It was too strange, too scientific, too philosophical, too metaphysical, too political, too much. But she kept submitting. And that feels so right, not just because this novel is about refusing the tyranny of homogeny, refusing to be the same as everyone else for the sake of being the same as everyone else. But there is also this acceptance that doesn't look like complacency. She tabled the manuscript for 10 years. She moved out of the city into the country/suburbs. She bore and raised her children, and hosting a dinner party over a decade later, someone just so happened to know a publisher who just so happened to love the book maybe half as much as I did, and took a punt, kind of assuming it was just going to be a giant flop, but why not? The publisher at Farrar, Straus, and Giroux took a punt, and then the rest became history. I can't imagine, because I was nowhere near alive in Nazi 1960. Don't let this gray fool you. But like, this book blew my brain, and I grew up in a household that discussed cellular regeneration and neuroscience at the dinner table. L'Engle wrote about tessering, quantum folding, cellular resonance, and the physics of consciousness before it hit pop culture diaspora, before social media and tech bros were meditating, before you had neuroscientists talking about manifestation. When I read this book as a kid, I didn't have a language for intuition or pattern sensing, but I knew that Charles Wallace, his magic felt real. Like, his ability to perceive felt normal. And I knew the father's obsession with science, on the one hand, felt totally at odds, but also totally in part with this way of sensing and moving through the world. I knew the tightrope between brilliance and belief, between focus and disappearance. It just felt so familiar to me. So long before mitochondria and peptides became a TikTok trend and cellular intelligence was associated with success, before wellness became a buzzword, it seems like the only person talking about the intelligence inside of the body was L'Engle and a few of her, shall we say, femme, hippie, upstate New York, Southern Maine counterparts. So reading this book felt like my little secret, this whisper that maybe science and intuition, imagination and data weren't opposites, but that they were entwined, inextricably so. And now all these years later, I get to talk about it. All these years later, the world feels like it is teetering on the same precipice. And so it surprised me not in the least when this book popped into my brain hole. And I thought, abso-fucking-lutely, this book will not just, let's not save the day like fantasy is saving the world in this series, but fill in a hole that I felt really good about, really excited about. So I'm really excited for this. The next 3 are going to be so much fun. Ooh, spoiler alert, there should only be 2 more. We might be doing a secret bonus episode for the first of the new year because I'm so excited by the series. Thank you for humoring me. There are years when entire civilizations pause at the threshold of themselves, waiting to see what kind of future will step forward. The end of the year almost always feels like this, and kind of depending on when you celebrate that, for some people it's like the autumnal equinox, which is the spring equinox in a different hemisphere. But, you know, this sort of ends of seasons very naturally can feel like this launch, or the calendar year, or the new year, kind of depending on your culture. They all kind of seem to fall within the same sort of 4-month spread. Another time when the world felt like it was on the brink was when most of these authors wrote all of these books. But this one was written much later than the books we've discussed previously. The early 1960s was absolutely one of these times. Not because of any single catastrophe, but because everything felt like it was an inch from catastrophe. Technology was accelerating faster than ethics. Politics vibrating at frequencies the human nervous system wasn't built for. And there was this collective sense that reality could tilt slightly and send everything sliding in a new direction. This was the Cuban Missile Crisis. This was children practicing bomb drills at school. This was governments leveraging secrets to start cold wars. This was artists and creatives being exercised from the very communities they crafted due to suspicions. This was scientists experimenting with physics that sounded suspiciously like magic, parents disappearing into their work, two parents starting to work. This was a time when communities praised conformity as if it were patriotism. It was a decade suspended between discovery and disaster, a decade holding its breath. And L'Engle did what visionaries do when the world gets too tight to exhale. She made a tear in the fabric, a rupture in the narrative, a wrinkle in the explosive pressure. This is a story where the people who don't fit are the only people who can save the future. I'm winking at you if you are only listening. A story for children who grew up to be adults trying to remember what made them powerful in the first place. This is a story for misfits, rebels, people who are sensitive, pattern synthesizers, anyone whose cellular intelligence has already started whispering, maybe even yelling, there is more here. You are more here. The world was holding its breath, and not because there was anything one could put their finger on, right? Like news and suspicion, like I said, it was coming to terms for the first time that Americans might not be able to like trust their governments explicitly, trust their leaders explicitly, that perhaps the corporation you had invested your entire life in or the home that you had spent your entire adulthood working on might not be forever. So we start to see these themes get reflected into the characters and the plot lines within A Wrinkle in Time. Meg Murray is awkward, brilliant, volatile, and misunderstood. Her father, a physicist experimenting with the mathematics of tesseracts, which are folds in space-time, has vanished under mysterious government circumstances. Most adults assume he just abandoned the family. This was when that was first starting. We were starting to see divorce and a caretaker just kind of disappearing. Meg refused to believe her father left her. She knew that isn't what happened. Meg had a telepathic younger brother by the name of Charles Wallace, and their unexpected champion and companion, Calvin. They meet three cosmic beings disguised as eccentric women, Mrs. Whatsit, Mrs. Who, and Mrs. Which. They reveal that Mr. Murray is alive, but trapped on a far-off planet governed by a malevolent force. The force is it. Not a monster, a dictator, not a villain, but a disembodied consciousness obsessed with perfect conformity. A mind that punishes deviation. A system that forces every heartbeat, every breath, every step into synchronization. Meg and the boys tesser across galaxies to rescue her father. Charles Wallace attempts to outthink it and is absorbed by it. Calvin can't break through. And Meg, the girl who breaks rules without even trying, must confront it alone. She arrives armed with nothing the machine understands. There's no logic, no strategy, no technique. It's her single weapon, the one unpredictable variable that it cannot compute. Love. Particular, personal, unreplicable love. Meg's emotional intensity, the things adults had always shamed her for, is exactly the frequency that destabilizes its control. She retrieves her father. She saves Charles Wallace. She returns home changed, not triumphant, not perfect, but awakened. It's funny, when I simplify the plot like that, it seems so obvious. And that truly was a distillation. But reading that book, I mean, you can imagine how that resonance like shifted me as a being. If Brave New World showed us sedation, 1984 showed us fear. The Little Prince showed us wonder. Master and Margarita showed us truth-telling under tyranny. And Earthsea showed us integration. A Wrinkle in Time gives us the evolutionary power of difference. The Misfit, the neurodiversion, the neurodivergent, the emotionally intense, the one who refuses assimilation, the one the machine cannot predict, control, or absorb. Meg Murray is the archetype of the person who saves worlds simply by refusing to become homogenous. She doesn't make it easy, which is why she can't be swallowed. That's why this book matters now. We've built technologies that filter for the same. They literally show you what's popular. They tell you it's based on your preferences, but that's based on everybody else's preferences. Systems that penalize deviation, there's no room for being different any longer. Algorithms flatten identity into pattern. Governments use secrecy to, I sigh because of that word, right? But we're being pitted against each other. Conflict is being manufactured to create division, to yield control. And cultures are beginning to treat thinking differently as a threat rather than an asset. L'Engle saw all of this, certainly before I had language for it, but I think before any of us were even talking about it. Her response was not dystopia. Her response was to craft this female character and use her as a foil for change. The machine in A Wrinkle in Time is not mental, not military, not mechanized the way Orwell or Huxley imagined. It's quieter, cleaner, insidious. It's the machine that emerges when a society becomes afraid of difference. And L'Engle understood something most dystopian writers missed. Conformity doesn't need force. It only needs fear. Fear of being embarrassed, fear of being wrong, fear of standing out, fear of thinking or being different, fear of being too much, not enough, or just even out of sync. That is the machine that governs Kamaz-Otz. I think I've talked about some of these names in some of these books. Like, I never knew if I was pronouncing them right as a kid when I read them, or even as an adult. And then like somebody makes a movie and you're like, oh, cool. Kamaz-Otz. We'll go with that. This was the planet ruled by it. A place where every child bounces a ball in perfect unison, where every mother opens a door at the same second, where every rhythm is synchronized and anything outside the pattern is punished. Not violently, but systematically. The great revelation of Kamaz-Otz is simple. Tyranny doesn't require brutality when you engineer consensus. Kamaz-Otz functions on psychic pressure, rhythmic entrainment, cognitive narrowing, social mimicry, the quiet terror of being the one who moves offbeat. This is precisely how conformity works now. You don't need a dictator or a president to enforce uniformity. You just need enough people afraid of breaking the pattern. And this is where L'Engle's machine diverges from the other books. L'Engle talks to us about synchronization, a machine built from sameness, scaled through fear, maintained through the illusion of safety. Kamaz-Otz is not evil, it's efficient. The entire planet is a closed loop of predictability. No friction, no chaos, no mistakes, no divergence. Everything serves the algorithm of unity. The cost is everything that makes human being human. I mean, even as I read that, I was like, a perfectly closed loop of predictability. I could see how that might be desirable. and also lack any of the creativity I literally lust for. To understand it, you have to understand what happens when a culture becomes terrified of complexity. Meg, Charles Wallace, and Calvin arrive on a street where the children bounce balls in perfect sync. Identical bouncing of balls. If a ball rolls off beat, the child is punished. Not because they did something wrong, but simply because they were different. Difference is the crime. This is how it works. It offers stability at the cost of sovereignty. It offers certainty at the cost of consciousness. It offers belonging at the cost of individuality. It doesn't want slaves, it wants symmetry. Symmetry feels safe until it suffocates. And I know that you listening have desperately wanted to feel like you fit in, have desperately wanted to belong, to be included, to march in step at some point. But I think it's really helpful to remember what is on the other side of that want and that desire. It's this perception that we don't have something, or potentially we are unable to receive that thing. But what comes with it? Like, if we were to get that, what would we have to get rid of in order to create the space for it? Langle was writing about Camazotz, but she was diagnosing 1960s America. And it sounds like she's also talking about 2025 America. Today's machine doesn't bounce balls, it bounces data. Algorithms learn your patterns and feed you more of them. Social platforms reward conformity of thought. Workplaces reward conformity of behavior. Political ecosystems reward conformity of outrage. And education still rewards conformity of learning style. We don't live under a single it. We live under millions of micro its. The innumerable systems optimized for predictability in our day-to-day. Conformity is profitable. Difference is expensive. It would approve. Its greatest insight is this: a predictable population is easier to manage than a free one. That's why governments start wars. That's why corporations measure compliance. This is why platforms train their users to speak the same language. Difference is chaotic, inefficient, and dangerous. Meg, the protagonist, is difference incarnate. She is every quality Camazotz rejects. She's emotionally intense. She's socially out of sync. She's intellectually divergent, relationally unpredictable, and tethered to love rather than logic. Sound familiar? She is the worst case scenario for it. Because Meg's identity is not replicable, it is not patternable. It cannot be reduced to rhythm. She feels too much. She thinks too laterally. She moves too irregularly. In a world where sameness equals safety, Meg is a glitch in the matrix. And Langle is telling us something really important. The people the machine tries hardest to correct are the ones most capable of breaking it. So the horror of it is not that it's powerful, it's that it's persuasive. It speaks softly, reasonably, convincingly. It offers order in a universe full of chaos. It offers calm in a world full of fear. It offers certainty in a life full of unknowns. And I know what you're thinking, and who performs this, albeit offensively, but well. And people accept it, not because they're weak, but because they're exhausted. This is the seduction of conformity. It feels like a relief. You stop trying, you actually stop feeling, you stop diverging, you stop thinking. This is why children are the heroes of A Wrinkle in Time. the adults have already surrendered. Children still remember how to tesser. They remember how to break rhythm. They remember that the point of a heartbeat is not to match someone else's. Getting out of the weeds of A Wrinkle in Time, obviously I went a little hard in the paint there. Thanks for humoring me again. So the machine, draws some parallels to all of the authors' contrasting forces in their books, right? Uniformity disguised as safety, predictability disguised as progress, consensus disguised as community, control disguised as care, and stability disguised as love. That's how Langle's force, again, conquers. It's how the it converts. Camazotz doesn't imprison, it synchronizes. And the real world doesn't criminalize difference, it's just exhausting. That is the machine that Meg is fighting. This is the machine we are all fighting. And this is the machine that Madeleine L'Engle dared to name at a time when girls weren't supposed to write sci-fi novels. The science of divergence, pattern breaking, and why Meg was right all along. So let's talk about the blueprint, right? Camazotz worships symmetry. It enforces pattern. But human innovation, real world, measurable, documented innovation is built from the opposite, cognitive divergence. A 2022 study in Nature Communications demonstrated that people who display high cognitive dissimilarity, aka thinking outside the box, thinking outside the dominant patterns, they produce more original solutions under pressure than high IQ traditional thinkers. What does that mean? Let's use Meg as an example. Her intensity, her interruptive thought patterns, and her emotional complexity are not flaws. They are predictive markers of her problem solving under crisis. The machine feared misfits because misfits transcend the operating system. So something else that I didn't realize until I had the languaging for it was neurodivergence was this incredible theme woven throughout all of the different characters. Like, not only was neurodivergence their superpower, but they each had their own. Charles Wallace's uncanny perception, his sensing intention, his tracking emotional microsignals, reading environments without language, that was considered like fantastical when this book was written, but now we just call it heightened interoceptive accuracy, predictive processing, hypersensitive pattern detection. This is something that neurodivergents consistently bring to the table, and now we call it telepathy. A 2021 Cambridge study found that autistic participants outperformed neurotypical groups in detecting irregularities in complex sensory data. This was Charles Wallace, not magical, not a mutant, just someone with a different neural architecture. And L'Engle saw this in the 60s, what neuroscience is only starting to articulate now. What if divergence isn't a disorder? It's diversity of intelligence. It's evolution. Maybe I related to this a little too much, but Meg's emotional volatility is precisely what adults dismiss. Shush, be quiet, stop crying, stop yelling. Don't be so reactive. Don't be so dramatic. Research keeps proving the opposite. Emotionally intense people regulate faster after rupture, adapt more quickly under threat, and retain information, more information during stress. A Stanford study conducted in 2020 found that high emotional reactivity correlated with greater resilience and faster cognitive recovery after acute stress. Meg's emotions weren't obstacles. They were signal amplifiers. Her body registers risk sooner than her mind. Her nervous system refused synchronization. Her love breaks it because love is a non-linear frequency that algorithms cannot lock onto. And this was the Charles Wallace problem. He tried to outthink it logically, but it can compute logic. It can scale IQ. It is pattern synthesis. But what it can't compute is subjective specificity, what Meg brings into the room. A 2023 paper on AI pattern modeling shows that neural networks fail when confronted with context-specific, relationally derived emotional meaning. They can't do love, man. Meg's love wasn't abstract. It wasn't generic. It wasn't a concept. It was just love. A specific relational bond that can't be replicated. In mathematical terms, love is a non-computable variable. It breaks deterministic systems. This is why Meg succeeds when Charles Wallace fails. Wrinkle wrote the Tesseract as a physics metaphor before pop culture understood string theory or quantum folding. Now we throw terms around like quantum entanglement, nonlinear causality, dimensional shortcuts, folded spacetime models, emergent geometry. And these all validate this conceptual truth behind Wrinkle's Tesseract. Linear solutions fail in non-linear environments. A 2021 MIT study on dimensional problem solving showed that when teams were trained to think beyond sequential logic, their creative output increased by over 60%. Meg wins not because she's smarter, but because she thinks dimensionally. She stops accepting the frame of the problem. That's Tesseract consciousness. Ooh, maybe if I rebirth the podcast, I'll call it Tesseract consciousness. Is that too cheesy? Can you see why this whole series applies so incredibly to anyone willing to build in this 21st century to create business, aka solve intractable challenges? There isn't a spreadsheet for hope. There isn't an equation for love. There isn't code for imagination. And that is what ensures success. If you define success as simply the willingness to keep trying, which is fueled by the hope, the faith, the imagination, the magic. Camazotz collapses the moment Meg introduces irregularity. Why? Because synchronization systems, whether neural, political, cultural, biological, they are brittle under stress. A 2019 PNAS study found that highly synchronized systems become fragile when even a single node diverges. What is it? Centralized systems move faster and potentially with greater power, but decentralized asynchronous systems are far more resilient and have staying power. One person breaking rhythm can destabilize the entire centralized structure. This is the code it was built on. Predictability equals safety, safety equals sameness, sameness equals survival. But this is also the vulnerability. A single unpredictable variable can collapse a conformity-based system. I'm going to repeat that again for those of you in the back. A single unpredictable variable can collapse a conformity-based system. Meg is that variable. You are that variable. This is why I love that book. A wave of studies in the last 5 years confirm that cells process information, respond to energy patterns, and learn. Not metaphorically, biologically. A 2023 paper in Nature Cell Biology argues that cells have computational behavior, meaning they adapt dynamically, they store information, they communicate, and they have directional intention. This is the scientific doorway that Wrinkle and Time framed mythically. Life is intelligent at every scale. And intelligence does not belong to the machine. It belongs to the organism. It belongs to life. Wrinkle made the children the saviors, not out of sentimentality but out of neurological accuracy. Children are more plastic neurologically, that neuroplasticity all of us old people are trying to recreate through various quote unquote medicines. Children are less conditioned by conformity. They're more creative under uncertainty. They're more emotionally honest. They're practically neurodivergent by design, but certainly in expression. A Harvard study found that children solve impossible logic puzzles that stump PhDs because their thinking is less constrained by learned assumptions. Camazotz could never fully recreate a child. Children had never fully surrendered dimensionally. This is why Meg could tesser, why Charles Wallace could perceive, why Calvin could connect, and why the adults failed. The machine requires maturity. But myth, imagination, love simply requires being open. So what Wrinkle encoded as story, I might argue, science now decodes as truth. Difference isn't disorder, it's creative advantage. Emotion isn't weakness, it's intelligence. Love is not sentimental, it is mathematically non-computable. Neurodivergence isn't a liability, it is evolutionary pattern recognition. Dimensional thinking is not fantasy, it is the foundation of innovative cognition. Conformity systems break under irregularity. Cells are intelligent. Consciousness is distributed. And children resist systems adults have already surrendered to. That is the blueprint. That is the code. That is the operating system of A Wrinkle in Time. And I think this is another map for surviving our modern times. This is the scientific validation every myth Wrinkle dared to write. So, how do we practice it? Again, Earthsea gave us internal revolution. 1984 taught us to see the distortion. Brave New World helped us confront our complacency. And The Little Prince gave us permission to wonder. A Wrinkle in Time helps us understand how to move differently inside a world that demands sameness. So let's talk about Meg Murray as a methodology. Let's perhaps reframe emotional intensity to become powerful intelligence and use this divergence, this difference, as dimensional strategy. So, first step, where are you overcorrecting because you were told you are too ... or not enough ... Too emotional, too reactive, not emotional enough, not sensitive enough, too stubborn, too loose, too imaginative, too serious. The same critique given over and over and over again to someone who shows up a little bit differently than how you're expected to be. In this novel, the universe doesn't need to fix Meg. It needs her. Mrs. Whatsit tells her, I give you your faults. Not strengths, not skills, not virtues, not values. Faults as gifts. That is the devotion in the Wrinkle in Time universe. Stay loyal to the parts of your system you tried to shut down. So list 3 things, 3 personality traits, 3 habits, 3 perspectives you've spent your entire life trying to quote unquote fix. Ask who's benefited from me believing this was a problem. What system asked me to shrink, delete, dismiss this part of myself? And what catastrophic thing would happen if I stopped managing this part of myself? Just brainstorm, riff, speak it into your phone. But do go back and circle the one thing that scares you the most. I've confronted a few in the last 12 months, but perfection has absolutely been one of them. I thought I was the loosest, sloppiest goose on the side of the Mississippi. Turns out I'm the most hardcore perfectionist I could possibly imagine, that I can't even fathom reaching my own standard. Therefore, I don't try at all. For the next 7 days, treat that trait as a superpower in training. Do not try to behave better. Do not try to regulate it. Do not try to soften it to make others more comfortable. Just observe it without punishment. This is how Meg begins to access her dimensional thinking. She stops policing the parts of herself the machine wants silent. Devoting yourself to this component you have continually dismissed is how you will reboot your original settings. Name it even when no one else sees it. Charles Wallace knows things. Meg feels things. Calvin connects things. Each child carried a form of truth adults dismissed because adults have been trained to conform. So we might call these intuition, pattern recognition, embodied intelligence, EQ, nonlinear cognition, psychic coherence, relational accuracy. But the machine will teach you to distrust your knowing, your gut instinct. The machine rewards suppression. It praises denial of self. And it calls misalignment maturity. Have you ever given someone the benefit of the doubt? You are just gaslighting yourself. Truth in A Wrinkle in Time is simply this: say what you know before you can explain it. So try that. You can do it in your own space by just simply free writing an answer. What is the truth I already know but keep pretending I don't? That question will change your fucking life. What is the truth I already know but keep pretending I don't? Don't justify it. Don't make it polite. Do not shape it into something else someone might agree with. Write it in the raw. That was Meg's turning point. She knows Charles Wallace is still reachable. She knows it is beatable. She knows love is the only weapon that she has, and her power begins when she speaks what she knows into existence. Truth isn't revelation. It's just recognition. And then finally, take back. The climax of A Wrinkle in Time is not Meg rescuing her father. It's her reclaiming her brother. Charles Wallace, the brightest and purest of them all, is consumed by it because he tried to fight the machine using the machine's logic. This is the danger of brilliance without boundaries. This is the danger of genius under pressure. This is the danger of trying to strategize your way out of systems built to exploit your strengths. Does any of that sound wildly relevant and familiar? Meg defeats it not by overpowering Charles Wallace's possession, but by reclaiming the connection it could not replicate. Reclamation in the Wrinkle in Time verse means stop fighting the machine and simply reclaim, integrate, own, embrace all parts of yourself. You are wholly safe. So look for one place, a relationship, a habit, a belief. Maybe it's a story, something that already happened. And let's just say you've been in Camazotz mode, shrinking to match, outperforming to avoid, staying silent to stay safe, making yourself predictable to be acceptable. And just do one small, teeny tiny thing to break that pattern. One irregular heartbeat. One gesture of disobedience. Send the text you're afraid to send. Say the thing you've rehearsed in silence. Interrupt the meeting with a question no one wants asked. Stop bouncing that metaphorical ball in time with everybody else. You don't win against conforming by conquering it. You win by glitching. Reclamation is Meg whispering, Charles Wallace, I love you, into the void, and destabling a system that had no defense against specificity. Reclamation is the moment a dimensional shift begins. So just to repeat those three: choose an aspect of yourself you have long denied and see if you can accept it. Confront a truth even you're afraid to admit. It's probably not fear. It's probably just wildly uncomfortable. You don't have to do anything about it. It's just admitting it. And then break the pattern. Do something fucking different. Do something that's not you. We've seen these being repeated in every book, at least through the lens I am currently looking through. Devotion returns you to the self you were before you learned to shrink. Truth restores your access to the knowledge your body has been storing. Reclamation activates the part of you that refuses to synchronize. These aren't mindset shifts. These are dimensional shifts. This will change you as a human being. The moment you stop regulating yourself into acceptability, your consciousness tessers. This will make you unpredictable, and anything can happen from there. The moment you speak a truth, systems taught you to avoid your perception tessers. The moment you stop running and reclaim what was taken, your leadership tessers. You stop solving problems in the machine's methodology and you start solving them in your own way. This is how you disrupt. This is how you imagine. This is how you create something sustainable and better than has ever been before. You don't have to overpower the world that shaped you. You only have to stop agreeing to stay in rhythm. Every book in this series ends the same way. Not with instructions or even with certainty, but with this revelation, the kind of insight that doesn't arrive as language, but as recognition. This is what I felt reading this book 18 different times. It's like this feeling, it's being stopped in your tracks. A Wrinkle in Time left me with three big takeaways, or I think I just always look for those three takeaways, right? Difference isn't the deviation, it's your dimension. Like this is your microverse in the metaverse. Meg spent her entire life believing her faults were obstacles she needed to control. Her anger, her stubbornness, her emotional saturation, her inability to smooth her edges. So fucking relatable. But nothing in Camazotz was more dangerous than a girl who refused to become predictable. This is the revelation. You were never supposed to blend. You were supposed to bend dimensions. What you've called too much or what they did was simply a part of you operating at a frequency that the world wasn't yet calibrated to. Your intensity wasn't a malfunction. It was you. It was your navigation system. It was your discernment. If it didn't work, you weren't meant to be there. And the moment you stop treating your difference as a problem is the moment it becomes your portal. Your life has proven this. Every breakthrough you have ever had arrived you at the moment you stopped performing and you started tessering. Difference isn't deviation. It's dimensional access. What you fear collapsing is already being asked to be released. Again, if that doesn't hit you right now, I don't know where you are, where you're living, or what you're doing. In this novel, Meg tries to outrun fear. She tries to outthink it, outshame it, outregulate it, and none of that works. Every time she avoids the truth, she feels the world constrict. Every time she denies her knowing, the path disappears. Every time she performs normalcy, something essential breaks. It's only when she stops resisting collapse, when she accepts it as direction instead of disaster, that's the way forward appears. The revelation is simple, but perhaps radical. What collapses your life is never a threat. It's the pattern you cling to in order to avoid the collapse. Every contraction you've experienced this year, emotional, relational, financial, identity level, it wasn't a punishment. It was precision. It was your system saying, this rhythm isn't mine. This is not the beat of my own drum. Stop trying to march to their beat. The collapse isn't the enemy. It is recalibration. It's a part of your life wrinkling so the future can reach you faster. Lastly, maybe this is my own very romantic heart. Love breaks every system that tries to turn you into a pattern. Every single business owner I know, every single artist I know, every single successful person I know failed so dramatically, collapsed so completely. It was insanity for them to keep going. They lost, quote unquote, everything, whatever your everything might be. They sacrificed it not once, but multiple times. It is insanity. And if you have ever worked with me or know me personally, you'll hear me say the jury is out. People will often share their opinions on my own experience and story and lives and businesses and sound impressed. And I'm like, I could be a crazy, unhoused witch in the woods in weeks, let alone a longer timeline than that. Like, the jury is out. Why do we do this to ourselves? Love. This passion, this belief, this hope, this imagination, this faith. Like, what does it all boil down to? Love. It could conquer intellect. It conquered logic, conformity, and genius. It could not comfort the unpredictable. It could not predict the exact shape of Meg's love for her brother. It could not replicate the chemical signature of that bond. It could not flatten her devotion into an algorithm. And that's the final takeaway for me. Systems control categories. They cannot control our connection. Your life is a catalog of this truth. Every time someone tried to define you, you slipped out of definition. Every time someone tried to contain you, you overflowed. Every time someone demanded you walk in sync, your heartbeat rebelled. Real, inconvenient, unmanageable love has always been your tesseract. It pulls you out of the dimension where you are being controlled and conformed, and it returns you to the dimension where you are sovereign. Love is not the thing that makes you soft. It is the thing that makes you impossibly programmable. It is the thing that makes you you. Your difference is your dimensionality. Your collapse is your redirection. Your love is your liberation. Fantasy doesn't save the world with spectacle. It saves the world by reminding us that the things we were taught to apologize for were the exact coordinates of our power. The misfit is the frequency the machine can't process. The collapse is the doorway the machine can't guard. The love is the weapon the machine can't compute. You are not here to survive, Camazotz. You're here to glitch it, to distort it, to disrupt it. The future will not be saved by those who step in line, by those who are obedient, by those who conform, by those who succeed in terms of the algorithm. It will be saved by the most unpredictable, asynchronous, divergent creators. The ones whose cells refuse to march in time, the one whose love stays personal in an abstract world, the one whose nervous systems won't accept false safety. The ones who can tesser. And tessering isn't escape or disassociating. It's remembering there are more dimensions than the one you are being pressured to live inside. So here's what I'll leave you with. Yes, we did it. We got there. If you ever felt like you're out of sync, it's because you were not meant to be in this broken system. If you've ever been told you were too emotional, maybe it's because you noticed danger before anyone else. If you've ever struggled to make yourself digestible, it's because you were not designed to be consumed. And if this book stayed with you for decades like it has me, it's not nostalgia, it's recognition. A Wrinkle in Time isn't asking you to save the world, and neither am I. I'm just suggesting to stop surrendering parts of you that know how to save the world. Oh, the next two, I'm so excited. I'm really excited you're here. I'm going to leave you with a question. What will it take for you to remain human in what could potentially be the next collapse? I shouldn't laugh. There's horrific things happening that just continue to blow my mind I would say every day, like multiple times a day. So where's the world asking you to stay in sync? And how can you be irregular, be impossible to compute? Thank you. Thank you for believing. I love you.